Love is supposed to be the safest place in the world. For Amy Roloff, star of Little People, Big World, love was more than just a feeling. It was trust, devotion, and sacrifice. She had built a life of resilience, raised a family under the spotlight, and turned her passion into a legacy. Her little kitchen wasn't just a business. It was a symbol of her heart, her creativity, and her independence. But fate had other plans. Behind the smiles and promises, Chris Marek was hiding a devastating secret. Yes, you heard it right. Driven by love and trust, handed over half of her property, including her cherished little kitchen, to her husband, Chris Marek. Believing that giving everything to her partner was the ultimate act of devotion, Amy thought she was making the right choice. But fate had other plans. Chris Marek had been hiding a dark truth. For over a year, he had been secretly involved with a woman named Anna. And to make matters worse, shocking news broke out. Chris had secretly married Anna behind Amy's back. The revelation shattered Amy's world. The man she trusted with her heart and her fortune had betrayed her in the worst possible way. She not only lost her faith in him, but realized his true intention all along was far more sinister: to seize her property. Amy refused to stay silent. She took the matter to court. The truth came out in trial. Chris Marek's real motive was to seize Amy Roloff's property, and the judge ruled against him. Chris Marek was sentenced to 1 year in prison for his deceit and betrayal. In the end, Amy Roloff made the boldest decision of her life. She filed for divorce. Amy Roloff fought for her dignity, her justice, and her independence, and she won. This is not just a story of betrayal. It's a story of courage, of a woman who refused to be broken, and of justice served. Amy Roloff's story began long before the betrayal. To millions of viewers, she wasn't just a reality TV personality. She was a symbol of strength. On Little People, Big World, audiences watched her navigate the challenges of raising a family, managing a farm, and living life with dignity despite the constant spotlight. Amy was never just the star of a show. She was a mother, a businesswoman, and a dreamer. Her little kitchen became more than a brand. It was her sanctuary. Every recipe carried a piece of her heart, every product a reflection of her creativity. Fans admired her not only for her resilience but for her warmth, the way she made everyone feel like family. When her marriage to Matt Roloff ended, Amy faced a crossroads. Divorce is never easy, especially when lived out in front of cameras. But Amy didn't crumble. She rebuilt. She found her footing again, determined to embrace life with hope. And in that new chapter, Chris Marek entered her world. Chris was charming, attentive, and seemed to understand Amy's vulnerabilities. To her, he wasn't just a partner. He was a fresh start. After years of struggle, Amy believed she had finally found someone who valued her for who she was. Their love story appeared genuine, a second chance at happiness. Amy's decision to share her property with Chris was not made lightly. For her, it was the ultimate act of trust. She had worked tirelessly for everything she owned, and yet she believed love meant giving, not holding back. By handing over half of her estate, including her cherished little kitchen, Amy thought she was securing a future built on partnership. To the outside world, it looked like a fairy tale. A woman who had endured heartbreak was finally rewarded with love. But beneath the surface, shadows were forming. Amy's generosity, her openness, and her faith in Chris would soon become the very tools of her undoing. What she saw as devotion, Chris saw as opportunity. And while Amy was busy building a life of love, Chris was quietly laying the foundation of betrayal. This was the beginning of a storm that would shake Amy Roloff's world to its core. For Amy Roloff, love had always been about more than romance. It was about partnership, loyalty, and the quiet comfort of knowing someone would stand by her side no matter what storms came. After the end of her long marriage to Matt Roloff, Amy had wondered if she would ever find that kind of companionship again. Years of public scrutiny, heartbreak, and rebuilding had left her cautious, but deep down, she still believed in love. When Chris Marek entered her life, he seemed to embody everything she had been searching for. He was attentive, patient, and spoke to her not as a reality TV star, but as a woman who deserved to be cherished. To Amy, Chris represented a second chance, a chance to rewrite her story, not as a woman defined by divorce, but as someone who could still believe in happily ever after. Their courtship was filled with moments that felt genuine. Chris would take her on long drives, listen to her stories, and assure her that he admired her strength. He seemed fascinated by her resilience, her ability to balance fame with authenticity, and her devotion to her family. Slowly, Amy's walls began to crumble. She allowed herself to trust again, to believe that perhaps fate had finally rewarded her patience. As their relationship deepened, Amy began to see Chris not just as a partner, but as a true life companion. She wanted to build a future with him, one that wasn't haunted by the shadows of her past. And so, when the time came to make a decision that would test the very foundation of her trust, Amy didn't hesitate. She handed over half of her property, including her beloved little kitchen, to Chris. To outsiders, it might have seemed like a risky move, even reckless. But to Amy, it was the ultimate act of devotion. She wasn't just sharing her assets, she was sharing her heart, her legacy, and her belief that love meant giving without fear. The little kitchen, in particular, was more than just a business. It was Amy's pride, a symbol of her independence and creativity. By entrusting it to Chris, she was saying, "This is who I am, and I want you to be part of it." It was a gesture that spoke louder than any vow or promise. Friends and fans alike admired her courage. They saw a woman who had endured heartbreak, but still had the strength to believe in love. To many, Amy's decision was inspiring, proof that even after pain, trust could be rebuilt. But beneath the surface, cracks were already forming. What Amy saw as a gift of love, Chris saw as an opportunity. While she dreamed of a shared future, he was quietly weaving a web of deception. Amy's love story, written in trust, was about to be rewritten in betrayal. For Amy Roloff, the little kitchen was never just a business venture. It was the beating heart of her independence, a place where her creativity came alive and where she could share her love for food with the world. Every recipe she crafted, every product she released, carried a piece of her story. Fans didn't just see jars of jam or baked goods. They saw Amy's warmth, her resilience, and her ability to turn passion into purpose. The little kitchen was born out of Amy's desire to create something uniquely hers. After years of being defined by her role on Little People, Big World, and her marriage to Matt Roloff, she wanted to carve out a space that reflected her own identity. It wasn't about fame or money. It was about legacy. The kitchen became her sanctuary, a place where she could pour her heart into every detail, from the ingredients she chose to the packaging that carried her name. To Amy, the little kitchen represented freedom. It was proof that she could stand on her own, build something meaningful, and inspire others along the way. It was also deeply personal, a reminder that even in the face of heartbreak, she could create joy. When Chris Marek entered her life, Amy believed she had found someone who understood the significance of this space. She invited him into her world, showing him the kitchen not just as a business, but as a piece of her soul. Chris would watch her work, compliment her dedication, and assure her that he admired her drive. To Amy, this felt like validation, the kind of support she had longed for. So when she decided to hand over half of her property, including the little kitchen, it wasn't just a legal transaction. It was an act of love. She was saying, "This is who I am. This is what I've built. And I trust you enough to share it with you." The decision was monumental. Friends questioned her choice, warning her that giving away something so personal could be risky. But Amy brushed aside the doubts. She believed that love required vulnerability, and that true devotion meant giving without hesitation. For a time, it seemed like the right decision. Chris appeared supportive, proud even, of Amy's accomplishments. Together, they presented the image of a couple united not just in love, but in purpose. To the outside world, it looked like a partnership built on trust. But beneath the surface, the little kitchen was becoming more than just a symbol of Amy's devotion. It was becoming a target. Chris understood its value, not just financially, but emotionally. He knew how much it meant to Amy, and he knew that by controlling it, he could control her. What Amy saw as a gift of love, Chris saw as leverage. And while she poured her heart into the kitchen, believing it was a shared dream, he was quietly plotting to make it his own. The little kitchen, once the heart of Amy's independence, was about to become the centerpiece of her greatest betrayal. At first glance, Chris Marek seemed like the perfect partner. He was attentive, charming, and always ready with a smile that reassured Amy she had made the right choice. To the outside world, he was the man who had stepped into Amy Roloff's life at just the right time, offering her companionship after years of struggle. But behind that polished exterior, shadows were beginning to form. Shadows that Amy, blinded by love and trust, could not yet see. It started with small things, the kind of details that most people would dismiss. Chris became increasingly protective of his phone, often stepping outside to take calls or silencing it when Amy was nearby. When she asked who had called, his answers were vague, just a friend or someone from work. Amy, ever trusting, brushed it off. After all, she believed that love meant not questioning every detail. Then there were the late nights. Chris would claim he had business meetings or errands that ran longer than expected. Sometimes he would return home with excuses that sounded rehearsed. But Amy convinced herself not to doubt him. She told herself that relationships were built on trust, and she refused to let suspicion poison what she believed was true love. Friends, however, began to notice. They saw the way Chris avoided certain questions, how he seemed evasive when conversations turned to the future. Some even pulled Amy aside, gently suggesting that she should be cautious. But Amy, determined to believe in her second chance at happiness, defended him fiercely. She insisted that Chris was loyal, that he loved her, and that their relationship was built on honesty. Yet deep down, Amy sometimes felt a flicker of unease. There were moments when Chris' words didn't quite match his actions. He would promise to help with the little kitchen, but then disappear when she needed him most. He would speak of their shared dreams, but seemed more interested in the property and assets than in the love that bound them. Still, Amy silenced her doubts. She had given him half of her property, including her cherished little kitchen, and she believed that such a gesture demanded faith. To question him now would feel like questioning herself, her judgment, her choices, her belief in love. But the shadows were growing darker. Chris' absences became more frequent, his explanations thinner. And though Amy tried to ignore the gnawing feeling in her heart, the truth was inching closer, waiting for the moment when it would shatter everything she thought she knew. What Amy didn't realize was that Chris's secrets were no longer just whispers in the dark. They were about to explode into the light, revealing a betrayal so deep it would shake the very foundation of her world. Every betrayal has a face. For Amy Roloff, that face belonged to a woman she had never met, yet who had been living in the shadows of her marriage for over a year. Her name was Anna. At first, Anna was nothing more than a whisper, a name Amy overheard in passing, a fleeting mention that seemed harmless. Chris Marek had brushed it off casually, claiming she was just a friend, someone from his past who occasionally reached out. Amy, ever trusting, believed him. After all, she had built her relationship with Chris on the foundation of faith. To question him now would feel like doubting the very love she had fought so hard to believe in. But whispers have a way of growing louder. Amy began to notice subtle changes in Chris' behavior. His phone, once left casually on the counter, was now guarded like a secret. Late-night texts would light up the screen, and when Amy asked, Chris would quickly dismiss them. His explanations were vague, his tone defensive. Still, Amy silenced her doubts, convincing herself that love meant trust. The truth, however, was far darker than she imagined. Anna wasn't just a friend. She was the woman Chris had been seeing in secret, the one he turned to when Amy believed he was working late or running errands. Their relationship wasn't fleeting or casual. It was deliberate, calculated, and hidden in plain sight. For over a year, Chris had been living a double life, weaving lies with the same ease that he once spoke words of love. The revelation came like a storm. Amy discovered messages, undeniable proof of Chris's betrayal. Words of affection, promises of a future, even photographs that left no room for doubt. The man she had trusted with her heart and her property had been giving his devotion to another woman all along. The shock was unbearable. Amy's world, once built on the belief that she had finally found lasting love, began to crumble. She replayed every moment in her mind, the late nights, the evasive answers, the guarded phone, and realized the truth had been there all along, hidden in the shadows she refused to see. But the most devastating blow was yet to come. Anna wasn't just Chris's secret lover. She was his secret wife. Behind Amy's back, Chris had married Anna, binding himself to another woman while still living under Amy's roof, enjoying her trust, and holding the keys to her fortune. The betrayal was complete. Amy had not only given Chris her love, but also half of her property, including her cherished little kitchen. And now she realized that his intentions had never been pure. His love was a mask, his devotion a lie, and his true loyalty had always belonged to Anna. For Amy, the discovery was more than heartbreak. It was the shattering of her reality. The man she believed in, the man she defended, had been deceiving her in the cruelest way possible. The shadows had finally stepped into the light, and Amy Roloff's world would never be the same again. For Amy Roloff, the discovery of Anna was already a crushing blow. To learn that Chris had been seeing another woman in secret was enough to shake her trust to its core. But nothing could have prepared her for the truth that followed. A truth so devastating, it would turn her heartbreak into something far deeper. Betrayal of the highest order. It began with a rumor. A friend of a friend mentioned seeing Chris in a small courthouse outside of town. At first, Amy dismissed it. She told herself it must have been a mistake, a misunderstanding. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it gnawed at her relentlessly. Why would Chris be at a courthouse? What business could he possibly have there that he hadn't shared with her? Amy's instincts told her to dig deeper. And when she did, the truth came crashing down. Chris Marek had not only been unfaithful, he had secretly married Anna. The revelation was like a dagger to the heart. Amy replayed the timeline in her mind, realizing that while she was celebrating anniversaries, planning dinners, and sharing her dreams with Chris, he had been building a life with another woman. The vows he had spoken to Amy in private were meaningless because he had already spoken vows to Anna in public. The betrayal was layered and cruel. Chris had stood beside Amy, smiling for cameras, attending family gatherings, and presenting himself as her devoted husband, all while legally binding himself to someone else. It wasn't just infidelity. It was deception on a scale that left Amy reeling. The most painful part was the realization that Chris's actions had been deliberate. This wasn't a mistake or a moment of weakness. It was a calculated plan. By marrying Anna in secret, Chris had secured a bond with her while still enjoying the benefits of Amy's trust, her property, and her fortune. He had played both sides, weaving lies so carefully that Amy never saw the truth until it was too late. When Amy confronted him, Chris's mask began to slip. His excuses were hollow, his justifications cruel. He claimed it was complicated, that he didn't want to hurt her. But the damage was already done. Amy saw him for who he truly was. A man who had never loved her, but who had used her devotion as a stepping stone to seize what he wanted. The secret marriage was the final straw. Amy realized that the man she had trusted with her heart, her home, and her legacy had betrayed her in the most unforgivable way. The love story she thought she was living was nothing more than a carefully constructed illusion. And now, with the truth exposed, Amy knew she could no longer stay silent. The time had come to fight back. The truth had been simmering beneath the surface for months. But when it finally erupted, it was more devastating than Amy Roloff could have ever imagined. The discovery of Chris Marek's secret marriage to Anna wasn't just a betrayal of love. It was the unraveling of everything Amy had built her life upon: trust, devotion, and the belief that she had finally found a partner who valued her for who she was. The confrontation came late one evening. Amy, holding the evidence in her hands, the messages, the photographs, the undeniable proof of Chris' double life, demanded answers. Her voice trembled, not with fear, but with the weight of heartbreak. "How could you do this to me, Chris? How could you stand beside me, smile in my face, and promise me forever, while you were already married to someone else?" Chris's mask cracked. The man who had once charmed her with soft words and tender gestures now stood exposed. His excuses were weak, his explanations hollow. He muttered about complications, about not wanting to hurt her, but Amy could see the truth in his eyes. This wasn't about love. It had never been about love. It was about control, about property, about seizing what she had worked so hard to build. The little kitchen, her sanctuary, her pride, had become a pawn in his scheme. By gaining her trust, by convincing her to hand over half of her property, Chris had positioned himself exactly where he wanted to be. And all the while, Anna had been waiting in the shadows, the silent partner in his deception. Amy's heartbreak turned to fury. She realized that every late-night call, every vague excuse, every moment of distance had been part of a carefully constructed lie. The man she defended to her friends, the man she believed in when others raised doubts, had been betraying her in the cruelest way possible. But Amy was not a woman who would crumble. She had faced challenges before: divorce, public scrutiny, the pressures of fame, and each time, she had risen stronger. This betrayal, as devastating as it was, would not break her. Instead, it ignited something fierce within her, the determination to fight back. Chris underestimated her resolve. He believed that by marrying Anna in secret and securing a claim to Amy's property, he had won. But what he failed to see was that Amy's strength had never come from what she owned. It came from who she was. And who she was, at her core, was a fighter. The betrayal had unfolded in full, leaving Amy's heart shattered and her trust destroyed. But in that moment of devastation, she made a silent vow. She would not let Chris Marek's deceit define her story. She would take back her dignity, her independence, and her life. The storm had broken. Now, Amy Roloff was ready for battle. When betrayal strikes at the heart, some people retreat into silence. But Amy Roloff was not one of them. She had spent her life proving that strength wasn't measured by size, but by resilience. And now, faced with the deepest wound of her life, she chose to fight back, not with anger alone, but with the power of truth. The decision to take Chris Marek to court was not easy. Amy knew the world would watch. She knew the headlines would be merciless, dissecting every detail of her private pain. But she also knew that silence would mean surrender, and surrender was not in her nature. Chris had deceived her, stolen her trust, and attempted to seize her property. If she allowed him to walk away unchallenged, it would mean letting him win. The courtroom became the stage where the truth would finally be laid bare. On one side sat Amy, dignified yet visibly wounded, supported by her legal team and the quiet strength of her family. On the other sat Chris, his charm stripped away, his mask of devotion shattered. The man who once smiled for cameras now looked cornered, his carefully constructed lies unraveling under the weight of evidence. The trial was grueling. Amy's lawyers presented the documents, proof that she had signed over half her property, including her cherished little kitchen, in good faith. They showed the messages between Chris and Anna, the photographs, the timeline of deceit. Piece by piece, the puzzle of betrayal came together, painting a picture of a man whose intentions had never been love, but greed. Chris' defense tried to spin the story. They argued that his relationship with Anna was complicated, that his marriage to her was a mistake, that Amy had misunderstood his intentions. But the evidence was undeniable. The secret marriage certificate, the financial records, the testimony of witnesses who had seen Chris with Anna, all of it pointed to one conclusion. Chris Marek had orchestrated a calculated plan to take what was never his. Amy sat through it all with quiet strength. Though her heart ached, she refused to let her pain define her. She spoke with honesty, recounting how she had trusted Chris, how she had given him everything because she believed in love. Her words resonated not just with the judge, but with everyone in the room. She wasn't just fighting for property, she was fighting for dignity, for justice, for the right to reclaim her life. When the verdict finally came, it was a moment of vindication. The judge ruled against Chris, declaring his actions deceitful and malicious. His attempt to seize Amy's property had failed. Worse for him, his betrayal carried consequences, a sentence of 1 year in prison. For Amy, it wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. The courtroom battle had been her crucible, and she had emerged not broken, but stronger. Chris Marek's downfall was complete, and Amy Roloff had proven that even in the face of betrayal, justice could prevail. The gavel had fallen, and with it, Chris Marek's carefully constructed facade crumbled into dust. For months, he had lived a double life, weaving lies with the precision of a master manipulator. But in the courtroom, stripped of charm and excuses, he was nothing more than a man exposed. A man whose greed had finally caught up with him. The judge's ruling was clear. Chris had acted with deceit, exploiting Amy Roloff's trust to gain access to her property and her cherished little kitchen. His betrayal was not just personal. It was calculated, deliberate, and cruel. The sentence, 1 year in prison, was a symbolic but powerful declaration that his actions carried consequences. For Amy, the verdict was bittersweet. She had not sought revenge, but justice. Watching Chris led away in handcuffs was not a moment of triumph, but of closure. The man she once believed was her partner had been revealed for what he truly was, a fraud. And though the scars of betrayal would remain, Amy could finally breathe knowing that the truth had prevailed. Outside the courtroom, the world reacted with shock. Fans of Little People, Big World, who had once admired Amy's second chance at love, were stunned by the revelations. Headlines blared the story: Chris Marek sentenced for betrayal of Amy Roloff. Social media erupted with outrage, sympathy, and disbelief. Some expressed anger at Chris' audacity, while others rallied around Amy, praising her courage to fight back. For Chris, the downfall was swift and merciless. The man who once basked in the glow of Amy's fame now found himself disgraced, his reputation in ruins. Friends distanced themselves, business contacts severed ties, and the public that once smiled at his appearances now saw him as a cautionary tale. His name, once linked to Amy's love story, was now forever tied to betrayal and deceit. In prison, Chris faced the reality of his choices. The walls that confined him were not just physical, but symbolic. A reminder that lies, no matter how carefully spun, cannot stand forever. The empire he thought he could build on Amy's trust had collapsed, leaving him with nothing but regret and the bitter taste of his own downfall. Meanwhile, Amy emerged from the storm with her dignity intact. Though wounded, she had proven that betrayal would not define her. She had stood in court, faced the man who deceived her, and reclaimed her independence. Chris's downfall was not her victory alone. It was a message to anyone who believed they could exploit love for personal gain. The chapter of Chris Marek's life that began with charm and promises ended in disgrace and isolation. His downfall was complete, and Amy Roloff's story was no longer one of betrayal, but of resilience. The courtroom battle had ended, and Chris Marek's downfall was complete. He was sentenced, disgraced, and stripped of the power he had tried to seize. But for Amy Roloff, the fight was not yet over. Justice in court was one thing, reclaiming her life was another. And to do that, she had to make the boldest decision of her life, to end her marriage once and for all. Filing for divorce was not a choice Amy made lightly. She had walked down the aisle with Chris believing in forever, believing that love could heal the wounds of her past. To admit that it had all been a lie was painful, almost unbearable. But Amy knew that holding on to a broken promise would only chain her to the very betrayal she had fought so hard to escape. The day she signed the divorce papers, Amy felt a mix of emotions. There was sorrow, of course. Sorrow for the years she had invested, for the trust she had given, for the dreams she had built with Chris that would never come true. But there was also relief. For the first time in months, she felt the weight lifting from her shoulders. The man who had deceived her no longer had a claim on her heart, her home, or her future. Friends and family rallied around her. They reminded her of her strength, of the woman who had built a life in the spotlight with dignity and grace. They told her that this was not the end of her story, but the beginning of a new one. And Amy, though still healing, began to believe it. The divorce was more than a legal separation. It was a declaration of independence. By walking away, Amy was reclaiming not just her property, but her identity. She was no longer the woman betrayed, no longer the victim of Chris' lies. She was Amy Roloff, resilient, determined, and unbroken. Chris, meanwhile, faced the consequences of his actions alone. His secret marriage to Anna, his deceit, his greed, all of it had left him with nothing but shame. The man who once stood beside Amy as her partner was now a cautionary tale, a reminder that betrayal always carries a price. For Amy, the divorce was not about revenge. It was about freedom. It was about choosing herself after years of choosing someone who never truly chose her. It was about proving that even in the face of heartbreak, she could rise, stronger than before. As she walked out of the courthouse that final day, papers in hand, Amy felt a quiet strength settle over her. She had lost love, but she had gained something far more powerful: her dignity, her justice, and her independence. Amy Roloff had made the boldest decision of her life, and in doing so, she had won. The divorce papers were signed, the courtroom battles fought, and Chris Marek's downfall sealed. For many, such a devastating betrayal might have been the end, the moment when pain eclipsed hope. But for Amy Roloff, it became the beginning of something new. She had been broken, yes, but she refused to remain shattered. Out of the ashes of betrayal, she began to rise again. At first, the healing was slow. The silence of her home felt heavier than ever, the absence of trust like a wound that refused to close. Nights were the hardest. Memories of Chris's smile, his promises, and the life she thought they were building together haunted her. But Amy was no stranger to hardship. She had faced challenges before. The end of her first marriage, the pressures of raising a family in the public eye, the scrutiny of fame. Each time, she had found a way to endure. This time would be no different. Amy turned to the things that had always grounded her: her family, her passions, and her work. Her children became her anchor, reminding her that love, real love, was not about betrayal or deceit, but about loyalty and support. They stood by her side, offering comfort and encouragement, reminding her of the strength she sometimes forgot she had. The little kitchen, once tainted by Chris' manipulation, became her sanctuary once more. Amy poured herself into her work, reclaiming the space that had always been hers. Every recipe she created, every product she shared became an act of defiance, proof that she could not be silenced, proof that her legacy was hers alone. What Chris had tried to steal, Amy reclaimed with pride. Slowly, the pain began to transform into power. Amy realized that betrayal, as devastating as it was, had given her something unexpected: clarity. She no longer doubted her worth, no longer questioned whether she deserved love or respect. She knew she did, and she knew that her story was not defined by the man who betrayed her, but by the woman who refused to be broken. Publicly, Amy became a symbol of resilience. Fans who had watched her journey from the beginning admired her courage, They saw not just a reality TV star, but a woman who had faced heartbreak with dignity and emerged stronger. Messages of support poured in, reminding her that she was not alone, that her fight had inspired countless others to stand up for themselves. In private, Amy found peace in small moments. A quiet morning coffee, laughter with her children, the joy of creating something new in her kitchen. These moments, once overshadowed by betrayal, now became the foundation of her healing. Amy Roloff had been betrayed, deceived, and wounded, but she had also risen. She had reclaimed her dignity, her independence, and her voice. She was no longer the woman defined by heartbreak. She was the woman who rose again. The storm had passed, but its echoes lingered. Amy Roloff stood at the end of a journey she never asked for. A journey through betrayal, heartbreak, and deception. Yet, as she looked back, she realized that what could have destroyed her had instead revealed her greatest strength. Chris Marek's deceit had been exposed. His secret marriage to Anna, his calculated attempt to seize Amy's property, and his betrayal of her trust had all come crashing down in the courtroom. The judge's ruling, his prison sentence, and his public disgrace marked the end of his story. But for Amy, it was the beginning of hers. She had fought not only for her property, but for her dignity. She had stood in front of the world, vulnerable yet unbroken, and demanded justice. And she had won. The victory was not measured in legal documents or headlines, but in the quiet strength she carried within herself. For Amy, independence was no longer just about owning her home or reclaiming her little kitchen. It was about reclaiming her voice, her identity, and her right to live without fear of betrayal. She had proven that even when trust is shattered, resilience can rebuild what was lost. Her story resonated far beyond her own life. Fans who had followed her journey from the beginning saw in her not just a reality TV star, but a woman who embodied courage. They saw someone who refused to be defined by heartbreak, someone who turned pain into power. Messages poured in from around the world. Words of admiration, solidarity, and gratitude. Amy had become more than a survivor. She had become an inspiration. In the quiet moments, Amy found peace again. She returned to her little kitchen, the space that had once been tainted by betrayal, and filled it with laughter, creativity, and love. Every recipe she crafted was no longer a reminder of what she had lost, but a celebration of what she had reclaimed. Her life was no longer tied to Chris Marek's lies. It was hers alone, dignified, independent, and free. Amy Roloff's story was not about the man who betrayed her. It was about the woman who refused to be broken. It was about justice, dignity, and independence. And in the end, it was about triumph. Amy Roloff's journey reminds us that betrayal can break hearts, but it cannot break spirit. She fought for her dignity, her justice, and her independence, and she won. But now, the question is yours. What would you do if the person you trusted most betrayed you? Would you have the courage to fight back like Amy did? Or would you walk away quietly? And in the end, is love worth the risk of losing everything? Or is independence the greatest victory of all? LPBW, Amy Roloff teaches Chris Marek surprising new skill. And fans rip Amy Roloff's husband, Chris Marek, why? And LPBW, Amy Roloff cuts Chris Marek from her name. Amy Roloff packs up and hits the road. I will explain everything. Even though a lot of little people, big world viewers gripe about the seasons going by too slowly, many of them enjoy seeing Amy Roloff and Chris Marek in scenes. Amy recently gave Chris a startling new ability. What were these two up to then? Following years of witnessing Amy Roloff and Matt Roloff argue in Little People, big world scenes, viewers adore seeing Amy Roloff and Chris Marek's new dynamic since they started dating. The ability to witness Amy thrive in her current marriage to Chris is a distinct aspect. Even the surprising bromance between Chris Marek and Matt Roloff is appreciated by Little People, big world fans. Friendships between current wives and their ex-husbands are generally uncommon. As strange as it may seem to many, though, Chris and Matt are actually pals. Amy Roloff and Chris Marek's joint endeavors are among the things that little people, big world viewers adore seeing. Fans enjoy following Amy and Chris' experiences, whether they involve riding his motorcycle, seeing a local band perform at a fancy tavern, or traveling the world and seeing different exotic places. Chris Marek is learning a new trick from Amy, who recently gave an update with her numerous little people, big world admirers. It's evident that Chris is willing to learn new things, and the two have remained close for years because of this. As seasoned viewers of Little People, Big World are aware, Amy Roloff enjoys cooking. A love language for her is being able to provide meals for the people she cares about, whether it's her well-known fudge or a filling dinner recipe. Recently, she taught her man how to make meatloaf, involving Chris Marek. Many Little People, Big World followers were told by Amy Roloff, "I love spending time with my guy. I demonstrated for him how to make mashed potatoes and cook the meatloaf recipe by clicking on the cookbook link in my bio. Yes, I realize. Though he has spent a large portion of his life alone, he has never needed to know how." Additionally, Amy Roloff shared with her large following, "So we cooked together in the kitchen. I enjoy preparing treats for him and cooking." The fact that Chris is open to learning from Amy and that they frequently spend time together in the kitchen is something that viewers of Little People, Big World adore. Based on the photo Amy posted with her most recent meatloaf update, it appears that they were both pleased with the outcome. LPBW fans rip Amy Roloff's husband, Chris Marek. Why? Fans of Little People, Big World recently attacked Chris Marek, Amy Roloff's husband. What did the audience think of him? In 2016, Amy Roloff, a Little People, Big World celebrity, met Chris Marek, who would later become her husband. After meeting at a mixer, the two clicked immediately. Amy decided to try her hand at dating while she was completing her divorce from Matt Roloff. Amy and Matt Roloff were wed for 28 years. Both of them were a long way from getting back into dating by then. Amy wanted to get back out there and try her luck, though. Chris Marek was quickly located by her. After all these years, they have undoubtedly managed to make things work. Even Chris Marek and Amy's ex-boyfriend Matt have a bromance. Since they were legally married in August of 2021, Amy Roloff and Chris Marek have been wed. They appear to have a successful and contented marriage. Chris has assimilated into the family and even tried to strengthen his relationship with the small children of Zach and Tori Roloff. Even moments from Little People, Big World have featured Chris. When Amy and Chris aren't filming for TLC or spending time together at home, they frequently travel to far-flung foreign places. To spend some time in the Emerald Isle, they recently took a plane to Ireland. Everything about these two appears flawless on paper. However, Chris was the subject of some concerning remarks made recently by Little People, Big World supporters. Chris Marek has recently caused anxiety among Little People, Big World viewers, especially in regards to his response to Amy Roloff's discussion of perhaps being ill and other issues brought on by her achondroplasia. One fan wrote, "Chris is giving me really shady vibes. He smiles as Amy mentions that he wouldn't worry about it unless it becomes a serious issue, and that she might become ill or experience issues from her dwarfism. He seems to be in denial, but he also comes across as condescending, even gaslight-like," according to a second commenter. Chris was accused by other Little People, Big World followers of deliberately pursuing someone with a disability in order to satisfy some kind of deranged obsession. Another commenter wrote, "What a creep this guy is. Amy's a moron. As an adult, I was born with a neurodisability. Individuals seek out disabled individuals for fetishes, to abuse them, or to persuade themselves that they are nice people." Fans of Little People, Big World do adore Chris, and not everyone believes he is plotting something against Amy. But this is certainly something to consider in terms of his intentions. As the current season progresses, viewers will have ample opportunity to reflect on this. LPBW, Amy Roloff cuts Chris Marek from her name. Due to her business, Amy Roloff's Little Kitchen, she and her husband Chris Marek appear to spend a lot of time eating together, but she interrupted him. How about this? There are many reasons why people believe their marriage may be in trouble. Fans of Little People. Big World may now believe that the TLC star is implying that she is having some problems. Social media teasers and advertisements for the Little Kitchen are visible to fans of Little People. Big World. When the TLC star cooks, Chris Marek frequently assists. He gets to consume a lot of it too. He doesn't show up very often, but occasionally he does show up during live chats between the two women that operate the company. Perhaps his time is being used to burn off all those calories. Amy Roloff has a wide range of commercial interests. In addition to her work on Little People, Big World, the TLC personality is a book author. She and Matt are also partners of Our Pumpkin Products, Incorporated. Her varied food offerings are accessible to some attendees of the Pumpkin Season Agriculture Festival. She did not, however, list Chris Marek in the Little Kitchen Company. According to The Sun, they were able to secure corporate filing records from the LPBW star. The fact that Matt's ex-girlfriend Amy added Marek to the end of her name when she filed an annual report for Amy Roloff Enterprises in early December was noteworthy, they said. She therefore signed it as Amy J. Roloff Marek. At the end of the year, though, things had changed. The publication reviewed the Little Kitchen records that Amy Roloff had filed at the conclusion of the year. But she signed that one off without mentioning Chris or Marek by name. That's even though he shows up in her films. Amy used to on the documents. Amy J. Roloff added Chris' last name after they were married. Something went wrong between the two LPBW stars, the publication speculated. In actuality, it might indicate that things evolve with time. After all, happily ever after, married couples must adjust to new lifestyles. Therefore, compromises are inevitable. Chris Marek already owns his own real estate business, so keep that in mind. He might not feel the need for her to write his name on her business documents. Ultimately, Roloff has been her brand for a long time. When Amy Roloff filed her company report for Amy's Little Kitchen, she omitted Chris Marek's last name. What do you think? Do you believe that the snub was intentional? Could it be that removing his name from her own name meant that trouble was about to break out in paradise? LPBW, Amy Roloff packs up and hits the road. Amy Roloff, star of Little People, Big World, is packing up and leaving. The mother of four told her admirers about her next big excursion since she is ready for a change of environment. Is this a short-term trip or a permanent change? Now, where is she going? See the photos from the journey thus far and read on for all the facts. Amy seemed to be content with her life in Oregon and spending quality time with her spouse, Chris Marek. However, if you follow her on social media, you are likely aware of how frequently she travels. She and her extended family recently traveled to Michigan. She's back on the road now. Amy invited followers into her bedroom on Tuesday's Instagram stories as she prepared for her upcoming major journey. She clarified that she needed to bring clothing for a range of climates. She said that she would probably overpack because it's tricky to pack for a motorcycle trip. Amy later posted a picture of herself and Chris driving together on her Instagram stories. Fans were urged to wish them luck, she said. Fans of LPBW are amazed by Amy's packing prowess. She was able to pack enough clothes for 12 days in one duffel bag. In order to learn how to pack lighter, some of her fans are asking for a packing guide. "I think I need packing lessons from you," remarked one enthusiast. "I'm not sure how you manage it." The sentiment is being echoed by others. Amy's fans are also sending their well wishes to her and Chris in the post's comments section. They wish her a fun and safe journey. They can't wait to see pictures and videos from their next major journey. It is my hope that Amy and Chris enjoy their trip to Wyoming. Keep an eye out for additional pictures of their destination as well as the journey. Are you happy to see Chris Marek and Amy Roloff have fulfilling lives? Are you eager to see more of their images and videos in the near future? Leave a remark in the space provided below. No more today. What are you thinking about this gossip today? Let us know in the comments. And stay tuned by subscribing to our channel to get more updates like this. Thank you.